Anthony, remember, Stubercube.
Stubercube. All right, cool. Welcome to Stubercube, the podcast we discuss all things stew, but with stew. This is your host, Anthony Adams, and we are joined by my other host. Say hi, Chris.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
Sandwich. How you doing today, Sandwich?
Sandwich. I'm doing fine. Just got home from work, ready to talk some cube.
Would you mind making me a sandwich before we start, please?
I've already done it. It's on the way.
All right.
It's being delivered.
Hey,
Nice.
and we also got the lovely stew.
The lovely stew?
The Stuber.
I love that. I love
Stubathon.
that. Thank you.
And, unfortunately, May's out again today. May's been kind of traveling and getting about the world a little bit. So for those that are on the wonder where May's at, just keep sending in those letters. Keep looking at the back of your milk carts. I assure you, she's still with us, and we talk to her quite frequently. So she is still part of the team. We love our May, and we will see you soon, May.
All right, let's get out the way something that I feel like we've laxed on a little bit is our drinks. We've always seemed to, I don't know, slot them in there. So let's get the drinks out the way, so that way we're not like interrupting the conversation as it's going to be flowing today. Chris, aka Sandwich, pauper / peasant / cube extraordinaire savant. What you got?
Today, just pretty simple. Just Noda Hop, Drop, and Roll.
Ooh,
India Pale Ale from Charlotte Brewery. So
nice.
And
Anthony.
I have myself an Oscar Blues Mas Lima. It is a salt and lime cerveza.
Nice, very nice. I'm just drinking a little glass of what my wife and I like to call diet wine. It's like the 7.5% lower alcohol.
It's like Ozempic wine.
Pure bright. Yeah, it's Ozempic wine, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Wegovy wine, as we'll call it today.
Wegovy wine.
Wegovy wine.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm surprised. That
Wine
will
Gover.
be on the shelves. Like, get your Wegovy cream cheese, get your Wegovy crackers.
I'm gonna copyright that.
Yeah.
I don't know how, as I don't own the copyright to Wegovy or wine or cheese for that matter. But we'll see what we can do. All right, what's the topic today?
Well, it's definitely not Vivi the Ornatier, but we're going to talk about... This is going to sound a little negative, this episode, but it's not intended to be. It's more about... Do you know this little meme, Chris, where the chef has got the white T-shirt on, everybody can picture this, and the pinch of salt's being tossed into the air? We're going to...
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll have to post that, but it's,
Talking about Salt Bay.
Salt Bay. Yeah, thank you. I knew you'd know that. So, Salt Bay. So, when you're doing that, you got to think like you're giving a little pinch. So, we're going to talk about certain mechanics in Cube that we choose as designers to either extremely limit or not include at all, and kind of the reasons for that. If you're listening right now and you're thinking, well, they've already kind of talked about that. Well, yeah, that may be true. What's interesting with these, even if we recycle ideas for shows, as we've been doing the podcast, as we've been developing more cubes, as we've been maturing in our curation, you will even notice through the timelines throughout this podcast where you may hear me say some very absolute statements, some very staunch remarks about my belief systems. Then 5 episodes later, you'll be like, well, maybe they were right? Like Anthony learns about the initiative. Check out that episode. That was actually referenced today in our group. So when we're talking about these particular mechanics, it's because our viewpoints may have evolved or why we are very choice specifically. And as you listen, we're going to pose some kind of questions and discussions before we dive right in. But I want you, the listener, to kind of think about in context to, say, your environment or a friend's environment at that which you play, as we talk about these ideas at 40,000 feet, how do they apply? Because the spectrum will change wildly. But let's start out with, as we do, kind of a featured card. Vivi Ornatier. Stu, I'm going to make him read this, and we're going to talk about why this is what we're talking about, not from Cube perspective, but rather that the best of the designers, we'll say Wizards of the Coast, how sometimes in certain contextual relationships, i.e. standard, they can get it wrong, and it creates havoc. Carry on, Keebler.
So, yeah, we'll talk about... Okay, so let's start with Vivi. Vivi Ornitier, this is 1 colorless, 1 blue, 1 red for a legendary creature wizard, 0/3. You can pay 0, add X mana in any combination of blue and or red, where X is Vivian Nitier's power. Activate only during your turn and only once each turn. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Vivian Nitier, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Now, to be clear, this is the paper version. There is an arena version
that's been errata.
that it has, well, errata, altered, hotfix, whatever you want to call it, where instead of just the 0 activation cost for adding the mana, you actually have to tap VV in order to activate the mana ability, right? So this, as you mentioned, does represent a bit of a problem, if you will, right? Vivi has been kind of causing some waves. I believe in Standard, it's a problem. I mean, I like the fact that you picked a single card rather than something that I would argue that many players and many Magic aficionados would argue is much more egregious, which is just the entirety of the companion mechanic, which literally had all of the cards errated because it was just a free 8th card. But yeah, you're right. Sometimes even those of us that we think are what should be doing the better job at this, they get it wrong.
So when we're going to talk about these mechanics, I kind of want to use this card as a card of a point of perspective. This is wreaking havoc in Standard, as we mentioned. VV was the core of the top-forming deck with like 91% of Izzet Prowett decks piloting this in 75-card decks, including sideboard. There's normally in 2 to 3s. They combine this with Agatha Sol Cauldron. I know that the intent of the designers at Wizards when they made this card and produced this card was not to seek and destroy the idea of Standard, and not that it is, but they're asking for emergency bans. They're asking for changes. Players are getting upset. This has happened more times than not. We've seen this over and over again. You mentioned Companion. We saw this in, what was it, Modern, whenever you...
Hogarth is probably one of the great examples in recent times of a card that Wizards probably thought, okay, even though the card is incredibly powerful, it's like a 7 mana, 8/8 trample. I don't think it had haste, but you're able to cast it from the graveyard, and but we'll make sure so that you can't use mana to cast it. No mana available when you cast this spell. Surely that will make this card not broken. Absolutely just went ham.
Yeah, we also can't forget our friend Nadu.
Yeah.
We know how fun that is to play against.
Yeah.
So, obviously not a mistake at all.
Yeah. Okay, so let's make this wild as we kind of pilot through these. The environmental context, and we're going to kind of we're not always going to do like what environment would this belong in, right? But we will use for conversation points maybe a vintage power cube, maybe a pauper cube, maybe a peasant cube, maybe some legacy cube. I mean, we got to have somewhere to set the criteria, but that's not really what we're going to talk about, because as we mention some of these different mechanics and why we, do that little bit of sprinkle, we don't go overboard and or choose to exclude. Our logic behind that is maybe the environment can't handle it, right? In the case of VB, combined with Cauldron, maybe, they didn't understand that, right? You've got people sitting around. This is what they do. They go and try to find mechanics that when combined or engines when combined break. Wizards isn't sending out a newsletter saying that you should run these 2 A plus B ideas and it's going to be the most broken thing and you'll assuredly break our entire game, or at least attempt to break our game, right? So they can't predict that. It's all the puzzle solving and the eternal idea of a Magic. As much as they want to try to see through the lens and playtesting and all that, at this point, with the introduction of commander cards and all these, jumpstart cards or anything that may enter in outside of the fold of normal just design or these universes beyond that come in where they're incorporating IPs and they're trying to make this really flashy Magic card to impress, understandably, the people. They want the card to be successful because it's coming from an external IP.
Right.
The logic is there. I get that.
Well,
right?
I think the other thing to consider, right, or maybe a couple of things to consider is, yes, in the recent times with the explosion of Commander being the most popular format and the 60-card constructed formats taking a little bit of a back seat, how that's impacting testing, I don't know. I would assume that, and I'm pretty sure I've heard that they really test predominantly for Standard with a little bit of testing sprinkled in here and there for the other Eternal formats. But for the most part, especially for the Standard sets, that's where the testing obviously goes. But now you've got not just an increase in this quote unquote casual format, but you've also got just a increase in the number of cards that are released, period, in a 12-month, 24-month, whatever rolling period, right? Things have changed. Standard has changed. You've now got more sets that are available in Standard. It's not like the 3 sets sets a year that we used to have. So that's obviously added a lot of additional strain, and it has basically meant that things have fallen through the cracks more than you would expect them.
I was saying there's no way they can test against everything.
Exactly.
And, they, as Anthony said, they wanted to make a flashy card. VV is a standout character in the Final Fantasy universe. I think I've never really played Final Fantasy, so excuse my ignorance, everybody out there. But it's just they wanted to make an exciting card.
The comedy of this entire idea is that when we see these Nadus and these VVs and these Scourges from these other formats, the peaks of power Magic players like, gimme, put them in my power cube now. Going to try to replicate this break, but in singleton, not fours of. It's always a little bit of comedy to that idea when we see something busting a format in half and you've got these peaks of power cubes. Everybody's like, you got to add this card, even though you're running singleton and you don't have the same constructed deck that VV have, a Cauldron. You see, it's always fascinating to me that it's kind of like I joked of the day where, the tiers on the playmat and we're over there absorbing them going, I'm going to put that in my power cube and they can go ahead and ban that card and I'm going to get it for a reduced price. It's a little bit of predatorial.
Yeah, that's great when you, unless you've bought a $110 freaking Ren and 6 that I've still never ever drawn in the bloody commander deck that I put it in.
I'm there with you, Stu. I paid like $80 for mine.
Yeah.
for my Ren.
And what do you think
now? It's like a $20 card.
Yeah, exactly.
I got mine 30 pre-order.
Apparently, Dockside Extortionist is spiking. If you're an MTG Finance enjoyer, or you feel like doing some specs or offloading, apparently there's got to be some speculators out there thinking that maybe Dockside is due for an unbanning commander. I don't know how much truth there is to that. Probably zero. I think most folks would agree
I don't see that getting unbanned.
I don't see it. I don't see it. So. Anyway,
okay.
There's a bunch of other cards on. There's a bunch of other cards on that list in Commander that were banned. I think because some people just got butthurt by them and didn't like it, and they were on the Commander committee. Maybe.
So, I would like to see J-Lo. I think J-Lo needs an unban.
So
and maybe
I do expect there to be shakeups with it, but I don't think Dockside's going anywhere.
No.
All right, so why are we talking about this? So when you're designing a cube...
Because we're a podcast and we talk about Magic, Anthony.
Kind of want to think about like creating a limited set. I mean, I'm not trying to be too obvious with that, but that is what you are doing. While mistakes will happen through playtesting, these things you will learn and feedback. And we can do our own internal emergency bans just like overnight, right? Go home, get card, swap card out. But when injecting these cards into the beginning, it's always good to think about as much as you can. I mean, 360 cards is a lot easier to try to see through the matrix opposed to 35,000 Magic cards in their core history, right? That's what they're doing versus us. So we're fractions of fractions at this point. And I'm not saying that it's impossible, but there are certain mechanics that specifically Chris and I know, and Stu, as we're building cubes, we are very aware that they have a stronger potential to drag down the game for multiple reasons, either through lack of interaction, overtaking a game, one-sided gameplay, whatever you want to call it, right? Or ultimately, if you want to look for just straight-up feel-bads and or repetitive mechanics or effects that, unless it dies to removal, there is nothing you can do about it, and the game will persist into almost like almost a game of solitaire, right? There's sometimes, everybody's had this one game where you sit there and we want to talk about Mana Screw and we want to talk about I got beat by this, but that one game that no matter what you do, no matter what cards you had in there, even if you had drafted your sideboard, you feel like there's truly no solution to get out of that scenario. And that's the type of cards that we're going to talk about either limiting and or being aware of as a curator.
I'm just trying to figure out where this makes sense, Anthony. I'm sorry. So at what mana value do we switch our philosophy from not interactable to closer mentality? What does that mean?
So,
what are you talking about there?
I'll even let you read it the way you want to there, and you said it. I'm not going to edit that out for this reason. You're trying to formulate what I'm saying. What I'm saying is in some environments, we'll say, well, that has such a large cost into it, even though it has indestructible or it has hexproof. We excuse these behaviors because they had to jump through hoops in order to accomplish that goal outside of cheating McCheaters and Reanimator.
Yes.
So there are certain circumstances where we're going to talk about key game mechanics that we would say are not necessarily fruitful to happy joy gameplay, but then I guess at what point do we say a card that has Shroud is now enter our environment and we excuse that behavior? We're jumping ahead of what I've got written here.
I see.
what are your
So
thoughts?
we're talking about basically that if let's say this thing costs 10 mana. Yeah, it costs 10 mana. You have to jump on 1 foot and do a ring around the rosy crap, and anything. But it has something that can end the game right there, be it Shroud or Annihilator or something like that. And you have to jump through a lot of these hoops. And we will, yes, I agree, we will make those excuses for certain cards in certain environments. An example that I just said, like Emrakul, the Eon's Torn, has protection from everything. But usually you're putting that in play and you're attacking for 15 that turn. You're annihilating them for 6, and the game is probably over. Then there's examples like, say, in a Pauper Cube. I don't run a lot of things with like Hexproof or Shroud in it, but I do allow for like a 6-drop in blue that has Hexproof, but it's just a 5/5. You know what I mean? And I think that's okay because you have to spend that much mana to get it out. And the reality is you should get rewarded for that and not have it killed by like a 2-mana spell, kind of thing. And, I don't like the little 2 mana, 3 mana, 4 mana,
the boggles,
but something at 6 mana is fine.
The boggles, right? We try to avoid these ideas, or at least in that vein, right? Or a 3-drop that's powerful that has. We're jumping all over the place here, but what we're saying is we want to be very specific to the type of mechanics that we put in an environment, but there is a certain range of allowance that will occur. I'm glad you brought up Emrakul. Yep. I wouldn't say put Emrakul in too many environments, but you're right. If Emrakul hits the field and you have paid the 15 mana, you have done the thing, you didn't cheat it in, you probably have earned that win, and that's okay. We'll shuffle it up. Doesn't mean that makes that card right. Blightsteel could be the same thing, right? Or we could make this even more simple. We could talk about, like, what was it? Benthic Giant at one point in a Pauper Cube. I think that's what it was. It was like 6 mana. Don't quote me on this. I'm not even looking at it. We'll say it was a 4 or 5, had Hexproof.
It was Hexproof, though, yeah.
It could be problematic, but in that environment, you want to have certain components that you gave these special circumstances to allow something you wouldn't normally want in there, but because of the nature of a Pauper Cube and kind of the lack of ability to accelerate into it or cheat into it, it is now becoming a closer, less of a mid-game menace like a Vivi, to bring it back to the top of the episode.
And I would say game's got to end as well. And I think if there's a limited amount of those kind of cards in the cube, it can be problematic if there's a density of them that are allowed to be taken by a single player and it gives them an unfair advantage, or even a couple of players. But I feel like depending, and this is where the context of the cube itself is very important, right? Environmental context, critical when making these decisions. If you have enough of them where you're going to have players that are able to choose even just one of them, right? If there's a density where enough players can get them, and that's kind of where your closers are positioned, then I think that can be fine as well. But it's where they exist, I feel, as outliers that the problems can come in.
I think mana curve plays a lot into this, and or the volume of pips, right? You said jump into those hoops, so we're going to talk about some of those. If they had to do all these things to make fetch happen, then I excuse that more. It's not that card is going to represent you're going to get beat down by said card. And we're going to talk about a few of those. You're still going to lose to that card. Maybe you have to find a way to say, maybe it's hexproof. Then you now must have a Wrath. Well, you only got 2 Wraths in the cube. Well, you got to have that 1 Wrath in your deck. Now you got to draw that 1 Wrath. Unfortunately, sometimes that's the way it goes, which leads me to my next question. When we choose these key mechanics, and we're going to get into the basic mechanics that we use as criteria, where do we, and Chris, I'll ask you this, where do you define the feel bads versus power outliers, closers, bad beats? I mean, these are wide ranges, but where do you land on expectations? Do those 4 in a quadrant the best you can, talk it through.
Okay, so like for closers, I'm much more forgiving on a lot of these mechanics that we consider to be, unhealthy potentially for a cube, like Blightsteel Colossus Infect. That can end the game right then and there. You sneak attack that in, it's done, especially if it's unblocked. Emrakul with Annihilator, all that stuff. We already beat that one to death already, but I'm a lot more forgiving to that. Now, when we get to things, the feel bads part of it is when, let's say, something just takes forever to kill someone. It's a slow death. They can't do anything to you, and you're just sitting there watching them. That, to me, is unhealthy. That is not.
Do you
that's
mean
not
like
something I would like.
grindy mechanics, like a slow aristocrats? You're talking about like a soft lock type
No,
situation?
no. I'm talking about more like a soft lock, where like the player can't do anything, or like they. I don't find those to be fun, and I understand what you're saying. I understand where you're getting with that. And aristocrats generally is going to ping you to death, but it's not going to be. You can still interact with them. You can still do things, but things that have like say some examples of like protection that you can't do anything about, like the classic one is True Name Nemesis. That one where it just has protection from that player. The only way to kill it is with the wrath. You can't block it. You can't do anything. You can make them sacrifice it, maybe, if they don't have more creatures, kind of thing. And it's like, it just makes it really difficult to deal with, but it's not a fast clock. You understand what I'm saying? It's like 3 damage.
Yeah.
3 damage.
Well, let's contextualize.
Or it just blocks forever.
Let's give a functional, an example here. Something we did last night. Our good friend David built a mono green cube, which we all enjoyed. It was the first outing of mono green cube. And for those that are familiar with mono green, it's going to be stompy. You're going to have maybe some graveyard churn. You could potentially have some shroud and hexproof if you wanted it. You could potentially have trample. Cards like to have vigilance on them sometimes. Occasionally they have ward, and we're going to talk about some of these mechanics. And then we have something like Hex Drinker that was in the environment.
Oh, yeah.
Well, again, to put it in perspective, this is of a 360 card cube. Hex Drinker is 1 of 360. We know what Hex Drinker does is you level it up, eventually gets protection from everything, right? I basically said and it costs them something to do it, but it starts out like costing 1 and then you level it up naturally. And it becomes an unbeatable force. I think it becomes a 6/6.
It is a 6/6.
If it maxes out protection from everything.
Yep, 6/6.
Well, now put that in the context of a current outing of a mono green cube from what the listeners, as you're thinking about this, how you would craft your own personal mono green cube. And absent of any, at the time, which we talked about, any form of board wipes, right? No overarching solution to this idea. If you think about it, you got fight spells, right? You've got maybe a few gotcha giant growths. You've got these type things. But once that 6/6 evolves and goes to its peak of protection from everything, I'm now a 6. I'm just going to run over you. You can't do anything about it. Why did we react so viscerally towards that? It's like the whole tribe, the whole group came together and we all immediately flagged this card. This card is a problem before he'd even launched this card. When we can find ourselves excusing the idea of an Emrakul in a Powered Vintage Cube or a Benthic Giant in a Pauper Cube or whatever Serpent you run. What makes this one different?
Context matters. Context matters. Context matters, as I think May has said a million times on this podcast. So the context is we excuse them in the Power Cube because Power is running exactly that, Power. It's running the most powerful spells. You're actually expecting these games to be very swingy. It's all about expectations, too. That's another one you need to look at. We expect Power Cube everyone's doing crazy shenanigans. And so we excuse stuff like that in a Power Cube, even though maybe we should or shouldn't. I don't know. It just depends on your perspective. But when you do something like a mono green cube, as I pointed out, I flagged that one immediately as a potential problem. And I said, you just don't have the ability to deal with this thing. Unless you can fight it right away, you have to get rid of it like right then, or else it doesn't work. It's going to kill you no matter what.
Yeah, but back to what you said, games got to end. Why does this not just end games? It's going to have to hit you. What?
I mean, it will end games. It absolutely will end games.
It has to hit you 4 times. If he started it out 4 hits from it, 4 connections. I'm being devil's advocate here on purpose.
I know,
but it takes 4 times. It takes 4 times without any rancors or any kind of buffs to it. Why is that card problematic? Is it because it cost 1 to get onto the field and you can initiate earlier?
It's the inevitability of a 1-mana creature. And sure, you've got to invest some mana into leveling it up, but it's the fact that as soon as that card gets to that max level and it's a 6/6, unless you can deal the damage back to your opponent to win that game, which actually I almost did when I played against Christian. I misplayed horribly. In fact, both the games that I played against Christian, but the second game was the one that he had Hex Drinker out. And that is the inevitability about it. I suppose to play devil's advocate to back what you were saying, I should have won that game. I should have done. I wouldn't have needed a fight effect, right? But I also had some kind of broken stuff with Titania and land sacking and the ability to create a bunch of tokens. So I should have, with, better gameplay, and it's been a long time since I've played Magic. So I think I would argue that just because, right? So I'll play devil's advocate that I could have dealt with it, but just because I might have hit that magical Christmas land, that doesn't mean it's appropriate for the cube.
The reason why I'm saying this is it's a 1-drop. Costs 1 Green Sand as a Llanowar Elves, right? And just like with the Llanowar Elves, it didn't have to land on turn 1. Lands on turn 1, this game is going to be over. Lands on turn 7... Well, maybe the game's still over because they have the resources now to buff it up just equally as quick, but you haven't taken that damage, and that the volleying has occurred pre to that. So they went from this card is dominating me on turn 1, leveling up, graduating as the game progresses, and or they come down later in the game, and now we're going to proclaim the idea that they have stabilized with this card. That was a cool game. You took it back with Hex Drinker. That was awesome. You see the problem here?
Yes.
Innately in this idea, but yet we all quickly said, you got to cut that card, David. And we're doing this off of, I don't know where this is coming from. This is like
hang on. Well, don't
contextual
lump me
experience.
In with this. Don't lump me in with this. I never said you had to cut it.
No. I definitely did say that because it's just, again, the environment I don't think is appropriate for it. Now, everyone can disagree with me, and that's totally fine. I don't care. That's my opinion. This is just Chris's opinion. So, but I feel like to make a fun environment, Hex Drinker is just not appropriate.
It's because the unpredictability that it can do exactly the scenario we talked about. That's what I wanted to get to here. I voted against it too. We know what it's capable of. It's not that it necessarily does that. We're applying experiences of this idea, protection from everything in a mono green environment, hands down, will have a higher opportunity to end in feel bads or power outliers that far exceed the capability of the cube, especially when you have no, Wrath won't even matter. Well, Wrath will matter. You won't even have a Wrath at that point. But you see the problem here, right? Is when we're choosing these cards back, I'm going to keep going back. This is what I do. We went up to VV. That one little card made sense when David's launching his mono green cube. It is, unfortunately, for better or worse, an iconic green magic card that is powerful, that will do a lot and make someone feel smart because they're leveling it up and I got protection from everything and instants and all that. Doing all that. If you want to look up Hex Drinker, look it up for yourself. But the idea is we have to now choose as a designer whether or not preemptively is this healthy for our environment. I will throw in this disclaimer. We said this. We don't want you to take away from this. Oh, I need to eliminate all my power outliers. I need to make this the flattest environment ever. This card's too powerful. Yeah, cards are too powerful. We know this. But the reason why we're kind of regurgitating this episode, we look back on things we may have said 3 years ago on this show, and now we're moving forward realizing, yeah, some powerful cards sprinkled in, like Obey Guy there, is okay. That's my point. But don't go ham with it.
There will always be a power outlier. No matter how many power outliers you cut, there will always be a power outlier. It does not matter how many you cut. There will always be one. One will just slot up, move up on the rank, and become the power outlier. So there's not much you can do about it. So you have to accept it.
So we've got from our experience, and I'm just going to run through this list, and they'll be included in our show notes. Yes, I did do show notes this time. I had a little bit of time to think here. And I put them in ranking order, but it's not because it was only because as I thought of it, right, as it popped into my mind. And I could give you reasons if I want to, but if a card says these things or does these things, I immediately kind of think it might be too strong for an environment, or I challenge myself before I put it in the environment. Hexproof. That's because only you can interact with it. They can't. That's it. Ward +3. I don't mind 2s. Where do you land on 2s, Chris?
Oh, Ward 1 and 2 is totally fine. Ward 3 kind of is pushing it. But when you hit that 4 or more, holy crap, it might as well have hexproof.
It might as well be hexproof,
yeah.
Shroud. I put Shroud on there. Shroud's an interesting one. Shroud means they can't interact it, nor really can you. But by then, you've chosen your thing to have Shroud that hopefully takes care of the game anyways. That one. That one's a weird one. We talked about, was it Thrun the Last Troll? Or did I get that right?
That's expert. Yeah, if they're in the last hole, it's hexproof though.
It has hexproof, which is even worse, right?
Yeah.
But we were talking about doing this in an old Raleigh cube that we're kind of designing amongst ourselves. We missed Thrun.
It's in my list. At least my the Thrun is definitely going to be in my list.
Thrun was in my initial old cube list too. He was in there too. Yep.
But even
I still have one. He's sitting in a binder.
I do too. He's going in that cube.
In our powered vintage cubes, one could argue that Thrun's not strong enough, and others could argue that Thrun's definitely strong enough. But if you really want to think about it from a vintage power cube, you also want to have interaction and gameplay. It's not always about the peaks of power in a vintage cube. It's also about that excitement of a game that doesn't feel so one-sided and lopsided, right? You want volley, you want counterspell, and I'm gonna blink this and get it out of your way, or whatever you're doing, ephemerating, all these things. This is what makes that type of game play exciting. Else it would be one-sided, mox, close out, Grizzlebrand. I don't know. I win, draw 7 cards, tack in, haste, you lose. I mean, whatever. I'm making up nonsense, but that's not a game. We want games to be interactive. Some of these mechanics don't encourage interaction. So even if you wanted to argue Thrun could go into a vintage cube, it is very deliberate that sure, it's mid-range. Maybe it's a little older, costs a little less than it did before, but it's also only hexproof, and it kind of gives me a one-sided advantage. There's a lot to break apart there. Now take that and put Thrun in the mono green cube we talked about. We went, no. Don't do that at all, right? Because in that he has a lot of enchantments. In that he has Rancor. Thrun would be a disaster. I think Thrun will be worse in that environment than, say, Hex Drinker in that environment, in my opinion.
He'd be his own archetype. He would be his own archetype.
It would be. I literally put all of my enchantments on Thrun, and you got the ability to regenerate him, correct? He had that too, didn't he?
He does have regenerate.
I believe so. Yep. I believe so.
That would be a miserable game of Magic in a mono-green cube. David, do not add Thrun, the last troll, to your cube.
He's not going to. He was never going to add it.
But wouldn't it be funny, right?
Sure.
Well, because he is aware of that out the gate from his experience, that even the word regenerate in that environment of mono-green is problematic when you're using fight spells, right? I mean, that's what you're doing, damage type stuff or whatever. This is problematic. So in that environment, contextually speaking, regenerate would not be necessarily the most fun mechanic to have in a mono green cube. Agreed?
I think, again, it's very card specific, if you will. Like it's fine on experiment 1 because you have to shrink the experiment 1, and you've got to invest a lot to make experiment 1 large enough, or at least, right? You've got to keep the creatures coming in. I suppose maybe not in a mono green cube. It's just you're kind of organically playing the game, and experiment 1 can get large, but there is a cost to it that is not just pay 1 colorless and a green that it is for Thrun to regenerate that creature. So again, kind of card specific. I think, like I said, experiment 1 fine, Thrun with all of those enchantment effects like the Rancors that you're talking about. And I agree, because you have that protection on the 1-drop that is basically means that you can't put any enchantments on it, but on Thrun you can. That could be a worse card than Hex Drinker, maybe.
And for those scratching their heads,
a Blanchwood armor.
Oh yeah,
plus a Rancor.
Yeah, I will include
you got a monster that is just going to end the game.
I will include in the show notes a copy of this cube so that everybody can see this. We're talking about it's in development. It's something we played just last night. Yeah, but it made a lot of these.
Build. It was the alpha build. Yeah,
had fun.
So moving along past Hexproof, Ward, +3, Shroud. We've got protection from. And I will just say, and we're going to talk about some, just think your classic circle of protection. I'm going to make that about as simple as I can make right now. We don't have to dig into that too much. That a card, for example, like the Mirrodin Crusader that said protection from, what was it? The double strike?
Wasn't there one of those? Oh, black and red or black and green or something like that. I know you're talking about. He's the one that has double strike, right?
Yeah, it was horrible Magic card.
I think he's pro black and green.
You talking about Mirrodin Crusader?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mirrodin Crusader. Then there's also the swords, the sword of whatever. There's 8 or 9 of them now or something like that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Again, we're not telling you to include these. We're just saying that there's a cost to the gameplay experience that you must be aware of. If you're going to include these ideas, you need to have or think about some form of counterplay. players don't want to sit down at your cube and feel like they're playing solitaire. That's really, I'm just going to say that they don't, or not even playing solitaire. They're just sitting there watching you play, right? I don't want to sit there and watch him just go off with Miriam Crusader across the table, and I'm running a Golgari deck, and then he chooses that he wants to put an equipment on it. Another sword of, we'll put Sophie on there, so now he's got protection from blue, red, green, black. Not that particularly matters. So even if I had treasures, now all I have is white left. I'm really hoping I'm running a 5-color good stuff. I'm just going to scoop. I can't beat this thing. It's getting too big. You've outextended my ability to even interact with you in this game. That's one card, one scenario. I want to talk about that for a minute as we progress to these two. Is these take iterations, right? You can put a card in. I encourage you to test cards. I'm just also encouraging you to pay attention to gameplay and or listen to your players, as David did in this mono green environment. Out the gate, right?
We're also playing a lot of this off of, we have between us many years of playing cube now at this time, building cubes and tweaking them and updating them and, everything. Each one of us has several cubes, that as you all know. And all of this is coming from our experience. This isn't coming from just because we don't like it. This is coming from, the fact that we've had issues with these and they've caused problems and our players have not liked it. And they, and they've asked us to remove some of these things, or we've decided to remove these things without them asking because we just didn't like the play patterns. So,
well, that's fair and true. It's almost like applied sciences. At this point, we've seen this happen. It doesn't even matter necessarily the application of said card, whether that be a VV or a Thrun or Hex Drinker or Mirrodin Crusader. We've seen these, we've experienced these. Then we can take that knowledge and apply it oftentimes to whatever environment it goes in. It doesn't mean we're right. I mean, take the Jitte conversation.
We could be totally wrong.
Yeah, we could be totally wrong. But take, like we've talked about this before, take that Jitte conversation we had in Nathan's Almost Legendary Cube. Jitte fits all the things that you would want. It's a legendary equipment. It's very powerful. It will end games. It's a good closer. Unfortunately, while it was ending games, it's taking advantage. It's almost it had the opportunity to dismantle decks that should have stood on their own legs, right? But it also didn't just single-handedly win the game. It sniped each component out of its way until it was able to get through. Back to what you said before. It's not like Blightsteel charges in, unblocked, hits me for 11. All right, GG's. Let's go to the next one. I try to sideboard in something to deal with that, right? Or I know you've got sneak attack now, whatever you've got. This one here was almost sniping at a slow pace, which has that weird vibe pacing about it, right? Like you have to know that a card like that can be feast or famine. We've seen Jitte do absolutely nothing, right? We've seen these cards not get through and get blocked and it doesn't connect or whatever. We've seen it been ineffective. And we've seen total misery blowouts where it's just taken an entire tokens deck apart and they can do nothing about it to eventually, for the slowest win imaginable, get through, connect, and all right, well, I just don't want to do this anymore. I'm just going to close the shop on this game. Well, do you want to go to the next game, Chris? Nah, man. I'm done. That's not what you want to hear.
You get the 2-0 here, friend. You get the 2-0 here, friend. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not even soul. It's almost exhaustion, right? So that is something when you're adding cards, you want to watch for those vibes, for that experience. We had a few games last night. We're going off the mechanic trail for a minute. We talked about mono green has a good opportunity of locking horns and can't get through. And what was your number one recommendation of a mechanic that he should add to that environment to help it get through?
Oh, just overrun effects. He didn't have very many overrun effects. I said we need to run some of these. You gotta run overrun effect. Even just classic overrun would be great in this. Just something you got to be able to punch through that damage or be able to give all your creatures trample. There's ways to put counters on them. Everything with a counter has trample. There's tons of that in green. So it's like trample is your friend in that cube, in my opinion. So
we talked about like a couple specifically, right? So Crater Hoof Behemoth. That's a card that ultimately I think would be fair in that cube. We also talked about removing natural order because that would instantly make natural order just by far the best card in the cube. There's also cards like Pathbreaker, Ibex, which I think would be very fair in that cube. But I agree, you need ways to win the game, to close things out that aren't just 1 or 2 mana, death by 1,000 cuts, a lot of frustration for one player, but a big grand effect like that ultimately, in the cases of things like Craterhoof and Pathbreaker Ibex, they're a little on the expensive side, and the player deserves to win at that point.
So we did a cost association there is what I'm trying to say. Trample is a perfectly acceptable thing. Vigilance is perfectly acceptable. But we found a way to excuse the idea of Infect, Hexproof, Ward 3, Shroud, but we also said they needed to have worked for it if it was included sparsely, and we were aware of that. 2, the player that opposed me worked for it. You felt like they earned it, didn't get it on turn 3, and just dismantled that game before you even played that game. Let's move on to another one that I avoid. We said protection. We know this. We don't want permanent protections. We'll talk about that more. Indestructible. I avoid the word indestructible, again, unless it feels like it needs to happen. Like, i.e., the artifact lands or the dual lands have the word indestructible on it. I am perfectly fine with that. I don't want you necessarily blowing up lands in my artifact cube. But I don't want to have some kind of threat in the game to be the 1 or 2 or 4 of various kinds that has indestructible that they have to chump block repeatedly, lose their game pieces in order to stop a threat that they do not have the ability to exile it, right? Or say Banishing Light it or O-ring it, right? They have to have that one card. And it always brings into context that idea, well, it dies to removal. Well, yeah, but some of these things are getting a lot harder to remove. And you, as the designer, as the listener, thinking about these key effects, have to think about, well, do I have real ways to deal with this, or do I have, in a 360, do I have 2% of ways to deal with this? And they had to have drafted it, and then they have to draw it. And you see, and how do you, so the best way to avoid it is to limit these effects and promote interaction. That's all we're really saying here in a nutshell. Let's go over to Landwalk. Landwalk came up last night. We're going to keep going back to this mono green tilt. I said add, what was it, Miri? I think the name of the character is the Cat Warrior. I think it's like a...
Forest Walk, I think.
Forest Walk.
Yeah.
And at first, Miri was, no, you don't want Forest Walk in this cube. But then we saw the fact that you couldn't penetrate through the ranks, right? And I'm not saying Forest Walk is the solution. I'm actually saying Forest Walk would be problematic. I'm aware of this, right? Because again, you put on these enchantments and all that. Miri would be your new force to deal with. It'd be an unblockable threat. And essentially, you're punishing players for playing your mono green cube that's going to have a heavy density of forest in it in their deck builds for a card that gets a free unblockable. But let me ask you a question about Miri. Okay, you got forest. It's a green cube. Miri is going to be unblockable. What's the difference between Miri being unblockable and then someone just putting a card in their cube that says keyword unblockable? There's not. But why do they feel different? I'm asking you this, Chris. Do they feel different?
The Forest Walk does feel different because it just, like you said, the only reason it's unblockable is because you played lands. It's not because you did anything, otherwise, you just played lands. So, that's how I see about it. If it says unblockable, I'm a little more forgiving.
Why is that? Like the illusion that's blue says the word unblockable.
It makes no sense to think that way, but from a just the way you look at it, honestly, it's just a visceral feeling. Feels different.
I think that's what I'm getting to. Is that it's something that we have that we just do. I immediately said don't do it, but then I'm counterpointing. Well, we can't break through the lines. We're encouraging Craterhoof Behemoth. We're encouraging the Ibex. We're like no. Miri's got Forest Walk and a green cube, but you should put cards in there that say unblockable. Do you see the problem here?
I do. And another problem, Miri has vigilance. That makes it even worse. But,
okay, all right. Okay, this is fair.
That makes it even worse.
Yeah, I was going to say,
not only attack unblockable, but also block forever.
Yeah, don't gloss over some of these effects, right? Don't gloss over vigilance or even trample as they're just okay. In the right, or dare I say the wrong permanent that can go, like you say. Vigilance would take that card from being a little bit of a problem to, oh my gosh, if you give it the ability to not just trample, but you've made it huge with Blanchwood armor or the like, then that's when it can become problematic.
All right, we'll move on to some other ones here. You got that idea, but this is stuff we're thinking about. Bribery type effects. I've kind of moved away from these ideas, but bribery, everybody gets upset. I want to throw some more. Like I'm being antagonistic Anthony today. So don't bribe me. Don't take my best card. But it's okay if you mind control it. Why is that?
Because I'm punished for my actions in the game. If you have a mind control, I have the way to play around it. Whereas something that allows you to just go into my library and get the best creature for just one more mana is... I have feelings about it that I don't want to repeat on a family-friendly podcast, which is what we tend to promote ourselves as. And yeah, that to me is one of the most feel-bad effects especially in any kind of creature-centric cube where you just have this, yes, thank you. Yes, you see that wonderful creature that you drafted that you were so excited. No, I'll have that. That's mine now.
Yep. And also, they get to see your entire library, which kind of sucks. But also, I can disenchant that control magic, friend. I can't disenchant the bribery effect.
That's fair. I'm not here to argue. I'm just wanting to understand why.
Absolutely.
I'm breaking down.
I never look back. I don't like bribery at all.
Yeah, and then I got some more. I don't want to get hung up on it too much because we're going to get some stuff here. But like I've got stacks type effects. That's kind of that one's hit or miss, like winter orbs and things like that. That's the obey man. You need to sprinkle it and or fully develop it and make it a real thing and make it announced. Like if it's full disclosure if it exists and people know it exists, there's a level of acceptance. If I come out with Tangle Wire and I come out with smokestacks and here's my braids and I mean, yeah, we didn't read the cube, and then, well, now you're playing against Anthony, and it is a 40-minute single match, right? We're just going to grind through that, and you're like, as much as I do enjoy it, I've said this before, but it's not because I enjoy it because it's neat, and I like Suicide Black, but again, you got to be aware of these type things. I know these aren't specific mechanics. These are more ideas of mechanics sometimes that we're saying here, a little reachy. These are theories, I guess, and some ideas, but yeah, you got to limit it or fully support it and then create awareness around it, right? That's it.
I would say also know your audience because you might really enjoy Stacks games and the effects that they have, the smokestack, the winter orb, all
exactly.
that. Yeah, somebody might love it, and you might have a group that you're
I'm a lot more
designing a queue for.
I'm a lot more forgiving of stacks effects than cubes. It just depends on the power level of the cube and what your goals are with the cube. It's like if that's something you want in your cube and your players are cool with it, by all means, go ham. It's great. Have fun with it. But if you got people that just don't like it, then people aren't going to want to play your cube. And you got to understand that. So that's part of this as well. So, like I said, I'm much more forgiving of stacks effects. I just don't think most of them are very good anymore, especially in like a vintage cube environment. Maybe lower power cubes, legacy style cubes are better.
They will be an old Raleigh when I build that out. So
it'll be slow enough that it should work.
One-sided mass destroys, mass kills, not symmetrical plays. I think these need to be limited to unless they're finishers and closers. That's a whole different topic. We can go down the rabbit hole.
I agree with that.
But Armageddon is something that could be a pain piece of an idea, but it's symmetrical, but you've also hopefully played it in such a way that you can close the game. If you're a bad person and you're just Armageddon from weird defensive posture or upheaval from some weird defensive posture, which I have done, it's all about gameplay at that point, but there's a situational awareness that must come online when you're doing these type of plays. So limiting these things, if it's symmetrical, I'm a little bit more forgiving of it. It's if it said like boil and you destroy, and I'm playing a blue deck and we'll go commander for a minute. And that one person like, I hate Anthony's blue wizards deck. I'm going to bring boil because it'd be funny. And just destroy all. I'm the only player now that's lost all my islands. I am out of this game. I'm going to scoop it up. It's multiplayer, but best to kind of put these type things to bed, in my opinion, and to avoid them unless that's what you're going for. Like if this is a bit or shtick you're doing, again, if everybody's aware that we're coming to a game that I should expect all this, I can advert the feel bads. If I come into a game and I'm like, wow, I built a sick blue deck, and I know blue's the most powerful card in the match. Now I don't have any lands because, well, I didn't know Boyle was in this cube. it could result into, I don't want to play this cube again.
Absolutely. And you really want to check your thoughts on these kind of things. You may love those old cards, that poor designed cards, in my opinion. Just, oh my God, terribly designed cards. Just that the land hate way back then was insane. But anyway, it's just you're going to have people not want to play your cube. So you just have to understand that. And if you're okay with that, by all means. But
I don't want to play it already. Or actually, I do. I definitely.
Are you putting Blood Moon in that as well?
Yeah,
that kind of
that's
effect?
fair.
Because I always would as well, right? Yeah, that's another sort of
Back to
potentially
Basics is another one. Is another one. So basically, Winter Orb is a miserable card too, in my opinion. It's very powerful, but it is miserable to play, to be on the receiving end of Winter Orb, because someone who's playing it is usually built the deck around it, either with like an Urza or something like that, which makes it even. Oh God, if I see an Urza and a Winter Orb, I'm just done. We're not playing anymore. We're just done. We're not playing. It's just like,
so this next one, I'm going to kind of categorize as fogs and propaganda type effects, and I kind of said that like. I don't want to have. I've seen a few fogs in cubes. One of them's cute. We actually talked about Spore Frog in the green cube, and right now he's going to keep it in. Anything that I'm hesitant to add cards like this, because I want these games to go in a trajectory of, they're supposed to be volleying matches. Let's go to the next one. Let's rotate this table. Fogs, if you run them and you have the ability to make them repetitive in any form, can become really problematic. They're cute the first time, and then after a while, like a Spore Frog, if you could recur it and keep doing it, but you're not winning, you're just lasting. I try to avoid, and that's a general mechanic. I know that's not really a mechanic, but we're going to call it that. Another one, too, that I feel like, and I see this in a lot of cube lists, is the card Blind Obedience. And this one's got a weird dichotomy about itself.
I don't understand that one.
Yeah, well, I understand. Yeah. I understand the incentive to put it in. Was it like their artifacts and their creatures enter to play tapped, so you're stalling them down? And then they'll argue that the extort is how I'm going to close this game, right? At least it's a little better than a propaganda, maybe kind of not certain. But I see that in a lot of lists, but it's not really encouraging game play for a lot of reasons. Where do you stand with that type of card, Chris?
Well, I personally don't like cards like that. I cannot stand cards like, I'm going to list a few cards like Propaganda, Ghostly Prison, Moat, or cards like that, which are just, if you don't like aggro, by all means run these cards, because aggro ain't going to work if you have these cards in your queue. And it's just, you might as well not even support it. Because it's like, as soon as someone lands a Propaganda against mono red, they're done. You're just going to keep playing until they lose, and that's it, because they're not going to be able to win.
Well, my question for you, Chris, is I've got a lower power cube, and I've got a peasant environment, and I want to prop up, say, my control systems here. And I've got my counter magic. Maybe I have, I don't know, we'll say the Thalia, they enter the play tapped as a creature. We've got a few of these things, and I've got some closers. I want to play my standard turn, pass, go type thing, draw, go game, get to my closer, my finisher that you'll excuse, and my large hexproof creature. That's how I'm going to win. But I need to stall them on the way in. Why is propaganda not acceptable to you in your mind? Because I need this to finish out. I need to establish that I'm in control. I see this problem here.
I think that's the statement that Chris made was about aggro. If you want aggro in your cube, then you can't include those kind of effects, right? Even if you want to be able to have some kind of mechanism or mechanic that props control up, you're doing so at the cost of one of the other archetypes that might be sort of the foundation for the cube, right? That's
exactly what I'm saying, because that's exactly what I'm saying. Those kind of cards discourage attacking, which I know is what you're going for. I know that's what you want as the draw. But I argue there's better ways to do it. There are other ways to do it. There are ways where you can run cards like, let's say your lower power cube. Okay, like Builder's Talent is the one that's really good. The one that puts an 0-4 wall into play. There are things that can stymie the bleeding a little bit without completely wrecking an entire archetype. It's like there are ways to do it that don't. And also there's bounce effects. There's things that can really change up how combat works. You can make their combat a lot more nervous for them. You know what I mean? Just like where it's not just, but they have to pressure you. That's what aggro is supposed to do. If you're running control, you got to be pressured. That's how it works. That's how Magic is supposed to work.
Yeah, if you've got rats
and I want interaction.
Yeah, you got rats in there and maybe even a little bit of lifelink. You've got a way for Control to have game without just, again, shutting down an archetype completely.
So from a design perspective, to kind of go back and overarching that list that we kind of talked about, because, we do talk about it. I want to summarize for anybody that's kind of bookmarking this or wanting to kind of understand that. It's just from our experience, Hexproof, Ward +3, Shroud, things that say keyword protection from, we're very cognizant of. The word indestructible, these are acceptable in small doses, depending on even what the card does, right? You have to make a decision. The word landwalk, which is an old term, right? And I've got some examples I've included in the show notes, like the boots, which I'll talk about. But you got to be aware of that. Use these sparingly or not at all, or decide, if you're in a mono blue deck, you don't want to have Island Walk, or maybe you do, right? Maybe that's because maybe you're in a mono blue or a heavy blue environment, but don't want to have Island Walk, but you want to go back to, well, it's okay that these 9 creatures on here have the keyword unblockable. There is no difference in my mind between these ideas. I mean, they're essentially the same, right? But it's easy to conflate them because we do that. Because some of us are older Magic players. Chris is an older Magic player. We know what it's like to get beat down by something that says Swamp Walk that's on some dirtily 2/1 zombie, and they're like, ah.
No, the one is the River Boa. River Boa is the classic.
Yeah, River Boa's got River Boa has that and regenerate. That makes it indestructible in its own sense. That's a good point. Those are Pauper Cube things. They're fine. They're closers. They're painful to play against.
I ran them for a long time. Yeah.
I don't mind them, but I prefer not to play against them too. River Boa and what's the other one? Does the same thing.
Mire Boa was the swamp walking one. There was River Boa and Mire Boa. Mire Boa was the planar chaos version of River Boa, I believe.
Yeah, I think the regenerate's more egregious out of those sometimes because they can stand up and block.
I've cut regenerate for most of my cubes, except on the one that I thought was Experiment 1. I still run that in a couple of cubes because I'm okay with that regenerate.
Good.
You have to work for it and you lose. So
we talked about this pet card. I love me an Experiment 1 from back in my mono green modern days. And actually, that was kind of the fun part. Yeah, that was the fun. I did say to David that I would like to see Thrun in there, but I guess I'll have to acquiesce to the experts on this episode. And
I just wanted everybody, the listeners, to understand where we're coming from in our card selections and what words we're looking at. I kind of want to close with, I've got a lot of different ones I put in here, but I want to talk about these 2 specific cards, and I want to do a little bit of close-off analysis. These are different. These are, again, not keywords. These are kind of, we'll call them triggered abilities or whatnot, but they still play into this idea. I want to talk about, with Chris for a minute, Curse of Predation versus Curse of Stalked Prey. And I put them at the bottom of the show notes. And these are weird cards, and you'll see these show up in some lists. But these 2 cards play very differently in their behaviors. If I was going to, I'll use these because I was intending to put at one point in my thought process both of these in the FEM before I overly developed the cube. I also at one point thought about putting both of these cards in the horror cube before I fully developed that cube. I later chose not to put either of these cards in here, but I'm going to read these to you. And I'm going to ask Stu and Chris to evaluate these 2 cards. And this is just an exercise we're going to do. Again, not keywords. This is more of that keen eye, that keen sense that you've gotten with your experiences of gameplay. Stu, you've been playing a lot of our cubes, and we'll talk about what the impact was. So I'll read Curse of Predation. For 2 colorless and 1 green, you get an enchantment or a curse. Enchant player. Whenever a creature attacks, enchanted player put a 1/1 counter on it. That's that one. Curse of Stalk Prey. For 1 colorless and a mountain, enchant or a curse. Enchant player. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to an enchanted player, put a 1/1 counter on that.
Big difference between combat damage and attacks.
Huge difference.
I know that Curse of Predation
the buff happens
is
on
one
Curse
extra.
of Predation.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say
Curse of Predation, the buff happens first.
Yeah.
The buff happens first. The Curse of Stalked Prey, the buff happens last. Funny enough, Curse of Predation has an uncommon printing. So it was in my my peasant cube briefly. I took that out. It takes over games. Because, my God, it's so good. You run this and 2 or 3 creatures, doesn't matter what they are. I don't care what the creature says. It could be vanilla for all I care. The Curse of Predation makes them viable threats. So
I agree with that. It creates, but I wanted to compare these 2 cards for the listeners as we're doing. We've jumped into card evaluation here a little bit. Again, we're not running these cards, but this is application of our experience. We now have 3 environments in our group that we said that these meet the power levels. You're a peasant, my film, and the horror cube. I have opted to not include these for a lot of reasons. Curse of Stalked Prey is the more fair version of predation, because the one is literally a triggered ability once you go into attack mode, right? You didn't have to even connect. Then you've created this unusual combat math that now occurs. And granted, we all put cards in our cubes. We saw these things last night in David's cube. I did not see Curse of Predation in his cube. I don't believe this card belongs in his environment.
No.
Well, because it would take over games one-sided. It would look very benign, very innocuous. You look at these 2 cards, it would be very easy for you going through your binders, the lister, and go, well, these are samey, and I want to support Gruul Counters and Grum Gully. Maybe Persist. Well, yeah, you're supporting it. But I wanted to demonstrate these 2 cards as kind of a little bit of analysis and how we see them. So do you both go yay or nay on Curse of Predation if you had a peasant cube?
I'm saying no.
Oh.
I think it's
definitely no. And I'm coming from experience of having run it. It is in a peasant cube. It is no. It is it's too good. It is it's a problem. Yeah, I tried it out for a while. Actually, now I'm thinking about it. It was in longer than I thought it was, and every time it resolved, it just wasn't fun for the opponent at all. Unless they had a way to remove it right then and there, it was not fun for the opponent.
Well, thank you. You pointed out. So now, if we're going to do the dice removal conversation, if you didn't deal with it before they launch, you now have to have removal pieces for the creature that's the biggest threat, and or you're losing resource blockers, right? But you also had to have and drawn and drafted disenchant effects. Else, this superhighway is going to overrun you. And so, from a designer standpoint, there's a lot that you could excuse this card. It looks like it would be great in a counters deck, and it in fact is amazing in a counters deck. No one's going to argue that. And there are environments where this is perfectly fine. But in an environment where you require someone to jump through all these hurdles in order to overcome this comes down on the field. This makes, as you said, a 2/2 bear that's vanilla is now a 3/3 bear that's now threatening your beast tokens, a 4/4 bear that's overtaking your beast. It's a whole thing, right? And it's cascading, and it makes you just want to fling into it. But back to my counterpoint, games got to end. This ends games. But I guess the core question is, using all these keywords and these different types of mechanics, and we've covered a lot of them here, is that how you want games to end? That's what you have to ask yourself as a designer.
Correct. You have to, as a designer, decide, is this the kind of gameplay you wish to promote? And if it is, and everyone's different, they all think differently. If your playgroup loves this and says, "Oh my God, I died to Curse of Predation. It was amazing. I had no problem with it, and it was so much fun. It was to try to beat it and everything like that." That's cool. Do it. Put it in. Run it. Have fun with it. But that's just not the environments that I like to play in and have. And these are personal choices. These aren't things that that everybody feels the same way. I know I'm different from I think we all think differently. I think different from Anthony, I think different from Stu. And it's just but I feel like this card doesn't promote the environment I'm trying to achieve, which is more fair Magic, which is interactable. Everyone takes game actions and everything like that. That's kind of where I stand on this card. This card is really good. It is so powerful, but it is just not right for my environment.
So I want to offer this. We've offered a lot of cards that we want to exclude. I'm just going to go really fast as we close out here so that you're like, oh, well, I've painted myself into a corner. I like these cards. I want them in my cube. We're not saying to exclude them by no means. You got them, run them. That's fine. Have responses to them. But I put some, I went through and kind of looked for cards that are a little different. So this is a joke. We poke at this instead of Mother of Runes, which gives protection, it can protect itself. Consider Giver of Runes that can't protect itself, right. Says another. Those 2 cards change, just like I just did in that example where we did the Curse of Stalked Prey versus Predation. They look the same. They behave kind of the same, but one has a little bit of an intentional flaw. It's kind of like the Death Star, right? You couldn't figure out why Porkins couldn't get near that, but you see where I'm going, right? They had that one little flaw that was in the Death Star that took them going all the way back to Rogue One and all these things to solve this one flaw. Make no sense. Canon's weird. Kind of like that. Have that little Death Star flaw in some of the cards is okay for gameplay. Limerith the Desert Doom, which is in the Fem Cube. Desert Doom has Ward 4 as long as it's untapped. It doesn't have permanent hexproof or Ward 4, as we'll call it, right? It has to. When it goes into combat, you now can interact with it. That now creates an opening for your, get air quotes, Doombladed or whatever, right? That's kind of what we want to encourage here. Instead of giving protection, consider like Spare from Evil. Creatures you control gain protection from non-human creatures until the end of the turn. They got an Elves deck they built in your mono green deck. I don't know why, and I've Selesnya. Who cares? And I'm going to get through with my humans and my weird Kindred cube that I've built that's fun right now. I can give Spare from Evil, and now my humans can get in past the Elves. That's only a one-time effect, right? That's okay. Or Blossoming Defense for 1 green. Target creature you control gets +2/+2 and gains hexproof until the end of turn. Neat little combat trick, but also stops the removal if you need to. But it doesn't give that perpetual back to Thrun that we can keep regenerating it, or the Mother of Runes we can keep giving it protection, or you can find these little soft touches. These cards, again, on a power scheme, they're nowhere in comparison. We all know this. If you're going to the peaks of power, rock on. But if you want to make this gameplay feel like Chris and I had a very memorable match that we're going to talk about for weeks after playing this game, about, oh man, that was sick. I mean, I was doing really good until you got that benthic giant out and you got hexproof and you're like, I know, and I'm like, well, yeah, but it took you a while to get there and I kept removing all your threat. That's something that people talk about. What people don't talk about is Hex Drinker, protection for everything, GG's. We just want to scoop it up and get out of that match as fast as possible to find not the most miserable match of Magic.
I say they might talk about it, but they're not talking about it in a what a great memory. They're talking about it in a what card do we replace Hex Drinker with because it's busted in your cube.
Yeah. So this is a consideration that we have to have as a designer. And this is a hard pill to swallow. You've got these cards that you love, you adore. You want them to work. But putting that little flaw in the Death Star with intent is not a bad practice as a designer, right? Go back to the top of the episode. We talked about VV. And then we don't like it, but they put the hot fix instead of 0, they put in tap. That's what we're talking about. It doesn't fix the card, doesn't fix the problem, but it definitely nullifies that repetitive issue that VV Cauldron created at the beginning of better designers than us. I think maybe. Question mark?
I mean, maybe. Yeah,
we don't know.
Hogarth got printed.
I don't know.
Companion, that's still on a lot of those cards out there. But yeah, I agree. Use your choices.
Well, in your best, do your best. But I hope this episode was helpful.
Right. Also, I would say be okay with making what might be mistakes. Try it. Try anything. And, just see how players react. And, it's like these cards may not be healthy for the environment, but hell, you try it and someone loves it and they love it. That's a win.
It just might work. You never know.
If you want to see all these cards we talked about, go to the show notes. I'll upload them to the Google Drive. They'll also be on the UberCube Discord, because I included a lot of things that we don't have time for, but they're applicable to these ideas. We've got some of these finishers on here. We've got some of these temporary protections on here. If you want to see it, check out either join the UberCube Discord, which Stu will give that in a minute, or go to our Google Drive, which will be included in the show notes. I will have this one uploaded. I know we're sparse with that. Not all these episodes are framed up as well as we'd like for them to be. We're coming up on Thanksgiving. We're trying to get the crunch done. So we're going to go ahead and take it to the socials. Thank you, Chris. We love you.
First of all, thank you, Chris.
Absolutely. Love it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you for coming and hanging out with us. So, as always,
where do we find Chris's cubes at, and how do we find Chris besides in his house?
I was going to say, as always, as we like to do with any of our guests, want to give a shout out. Where can we find you, your cubes?
Last 4 digits of your social security code, probably your zip code, hospital
all that'll be in the show notes. I'll put all that in there. I'll make sure mother's maiden name, all that stuff will all be in there. Yeah, so it'll be so you guys can find me. It's I want to be found. It's fine.
It's not that hard.
Yeah,
kind of tall.
All my cubes, of course, are on Cube Cobra. My nickname is Sandwich. That you can find me on there. I got a bunch on there now, and I think I don't really use Bluesky much. I do have it, but I don't really use it much. So you can find me there if you want. Sandwich_MTG is what's on that.
UberCube Discord. If
I was
going to
say our Discord.
There you go, Discord.
There you
Talk to him about Pauper Peasant.
No one uses that. What are you talking about?
Giver of Runes. He'll tell you why it's so great. So let's go ahead and move over to the socials official now.
All right. Well, first of all, as always, want to give a huge shout out and thank you to all of our Patreons for helping keep the lights on here at UberCube. If you want to get in on the conversation, you can go to facebook.com/groups/MTGCube. Anthony, where the numbers at?
Close to 1,200.
1,200?
Yeah, about 1,200.
Nice.
Yeah, we've got,
Nice.
if we're being realistic, you got about 150 to 200 that are, true any kind of social media platform that are active, and then the others are, well, they're there in the class. They're not raising their hand very often.
They're there. As always, if you want to support the show, you can use our inktogaming.com/UberCube affiliate link for all kinds of custom and large volume products, as well as playmats, dice bags, mouse pads, all kinds of cool stuff available over there. Go check it out. You can reach us at Twitter at UberCubeMTGPod if you want to get some updates from Anthony and some pick one pack ones for the Horror Cube. Have you done one of those recently?
We got past Halloween. We're not going to. I guess we can run that up until Nightmare Before Christmas.
I was thinking about putting together a Christmas cube. Stay tuned.
We already have a Christmas episode. If you want to hear a disaster
I'm talking
class,
about a Christmas cube.
I'm going to tell the listeners, if you have not heard us do Hermie the Elf, and if you want to hear a Christmas episode of all Christmas episodes, check out when we first started doing this show. There is one where we did voice acting. We're going to call it that with our good friend Nathan.
That's loose.
And it was loose.
I remember that one.
We had a great time talking about designing a cube around Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. If you want to have fun and drink some spiked eggnog for the holidays, we might suggest that. And speaking of holidays, let's go ahead and get this out front. Approximately, we always say approximately, December the 15th-ish, wherever that lands on the calendar, somewhere around that time frame, UberCube's going to be taking a break for the holidays. We're going to press through Thanksgiving a little bit, try to get a little fast forward here, but you can probably expect to find us back in early to mid-January. We always fiend for it like everyone else, but we got to have a little bit of downtime. We'll be traveling and families and whatnot. Thanksgiving is going to be problematic too. It's big here in the States, and we got families and all that.
Yeah.
So just a heads up to the listeners, that may be a thing.
Yep. I'm looking forward to the holidays.
We need rest.
Rest is it. As always, you can reach us at ubercubemtgpodcast@gmail.com if you've got a longer question or comment about this episode or the podcast in general. You can find us, again, thanks to all of our patrons, at patreon.com/ubercube. You can find us at Bluesky, ubercubemtgpodcast.bsky.social, and also our YouTube channel is at ubercubemtgpodcast 747. And as we mentioned, come hang out, come check out the Discord. It's all happening.
It's kind of buzzing now.
It's buzzing.
It wasn't buzzing before. It's buzzing more.
Buzzing.
The bees are coming awake. It's getting cold.
Oh, yeah.
So other than that, we're going to say the thing that we always say here at UberCube is mono green cube should not have hex drinker, and happy cubing.